When I was 24, I took my first solo trip outside of North America. I picked Thailand because it was affordable, looked beautiful online, and a few friends had gone there and said they loved it. I spent most of the trip bouncing between Bangkok and some smaller beach towns. For the first week, everything went perfectly. The people were friendly, the food was great, and I never felt unsafe. The incident happened during the second half of the trip. I had booked 3 nights at a small hotel outside of Krabi. It wasn't a resort or anything fancy, just a quiet place with maybe 20 rooms spread across a few separate buildings. It was surrounded by jungle on 3 sides and the ocean on the 4th. The area was peaceful, which was actually why I chose it. On my second day there, I rented a scooter and spent most of the afternoon exploring. Around sunset, I stopped at a roadside restaurant about 20 minutes from the hotel. There were only a few people there. I ate dinner, had a couple beers, and started heading back just after dark. About halfway back to the hotel, I noticed another scooter behind me. I didn't think much of it at first. The road was basically one long stretch along the coast. It made sense another person would be traveling the same direction. The problem was that every time I slowed down, they slowed down. Every time I sped up, they sped up. At one point, I pulled over completely and pretended to check my phone, and the scooter passed me. I felt relieved for a second. Then about 50 yards ahead, it pulled off the road and stopped. The rider just sat there waiting. I stayed where I was for maybe 30 seconds before turning around and heading back the opposite direction. I drove until I found a gas station with several people standing outside. I waited there for about 15 minutes. Eventually, I decided I was overreacting. I headed back toward the hotel. When I got back, everything seemed normal. The next day, I spent most of my time at the beach. Around noon, I noticed a man sitting alone near the tree line. He wasn't looking at the ocean or on his phone. He just seemed to be watching people. I only paid attention because he looked familiar. It took me a minute to realize he was wearing the same dark jacket as the rider from the night before. I couldn't be certain because I never got a good look at the rider's face, but I had a bad feeling. I left the beach. As I walked back toward the hotel, I glanced behind me. The man was walking too. He wasn't directly behind me, but just far enough away to look casual. I got back to my room and stayed there for most of the afternoon. That evening, I mentioned it to the guy working the front desk. He listened politely, but didn't seem overly concerned. He told me tourists sometimes become nervous while traveling alone, and that I should call if something happened. I actually felt embarrassed after saying it out loud. The story sounded a little far-fetched. A guy was at the beach, a guy was on the road, that was it. I went to bed feeling stupid. But around 2 a.m., I woke up needing to use the bathroom. The room was dark, except for a little moonlight coming through the curtains. As I sat up, I heard something outside. At first, I thought it was an animal. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. My room was on the ground floor. The footsteps stopped directly outside the window. I sat completely still. Maybe 10 seconds passed, and I heard someone try the door handle, but very gently, like just one slow turn. My heart immediately started pounding. The handle returned to its normal position, and then there was silence. There was one more attempt after a few seconds, this time slightly harder. I grabbed my phone and called the front desk, but nobody answered. I remembered the office closed overnight. The hotel didn't have overnight staff. I was completely alone. The footsteps moved away from the door, and I started telling myself it was another guest who had gotten confused. I don't know why I did it, but I stood up and pulled back a tiny corner of the curtain. There was a man crouched directly beneath the window, looking up. The second he saw movement behind the curtain, he stood up and ran. I locked myself in the bathroom and stayed there until sunrise. The hotel owner arrived around 7 a.m. I told him everything. For the first time since arriving, someone seemed genuinely concerned. He asked me to describe the man. When I finished, he immediately pulled out his phone and showed me a photo. It was the same guy. The owner told me that man wasn't a guest. Apparently local businesses had to report him several times over the previous year. He would follow tourists, sometimes for days. Nobody knew exactly what he wanted because he always disappeared before police arrived. I packed my bags and checked out immediately. The owner helped arrange transportation to another hotel closer to town. I thought that would be the end of it, but about 2 hours later, I stopped at a convenience store during the drive. While I was paying for a bottle of water, I happened to glance out the window. Across the road was a scooter parked beneath a tree. The rider was wearing a dark jacket, watching the store. The moment I saw him, he started his scooter and drove away. I didn't see him again after that. I don't know whether he intended to rob me, kidnap me, break into my room, or something else entirely, but he never made a move. But he just watched me and followed me to multiple locations, like he found my hotel and stood outside my room in the middle of the night, and somehow he always knew exactly where I was. I've traveled to a lot of countries since then and had plenty of strange experiences, but nothing has ever matched the feeling of seeing that man crouched beneath my window at 2 a.m. in a foreign place. Back when I was 17, my school went on a 5-day trip to Brussels and Belgium. I had several good friends with me, so it was set up to just be a good time exploring the city. Since we followed our school program, the activities we participated in were mostly obligatory. Don't get me wrong, some of them were a lot of fun, and everybody had a great time getting along with everybody. It's just that I've always liked doing things outside of schedules too. Do a few things we were not supposed to do for the thrill of the moment. As you can imagine, the days went by quickly, and by the end of day 4, everybody went to bed early since our bus ride home was going to be early, and it's a long drive back to Denmark where I come from. We'd have to be up at 5 a.m. I've always been up too late at night, so sleeping early and missing out on the city was boring to me. I talked to a couple of my friends, but they were all going to bed. I sat outside of the room I was sharing with 3 other guys from my school, and I opened up Tinder and started texting some girls I had matched with. Succeeding finally to get a hookup appointment a few kilometers away, I went outside with the key belonging to our room and the old building that was only for us boys at the school and some strangers. Adrenaline was pumping, and I thought it was kind of fun just exploring by myself. I followed the GPS location towards the girl's apartment, getting catcalled by old guys at bars for the first time and constantly on the lookout that I wasn't getting followed or anything. She had her own apartment in an area that I would come to see was very poor and sketchy. Big windows were lit up by neon lights from many streets, and male adult workers were posing in them, tapping with long nails and wild cross-dressing. Only a few guys walked past, everybody minding their own business. Being only 17 and alone, those streets freaked me out a lot, but I was also intrigued by having never seen anything like it. Finally arriving at the girl's apartment, I was pretty far away from the hotel that we were staying at. My meeting with the girl was great, we had fun. Nothing suspicious came from the encounter. So after that, I started finding my way back to the hotel through the GPS on my phone. It was September and cold outside, and now that my adventure had finished, I wasn't a fan of walking all this distance in what was now pitch-black dirty streets. It started raining. The GPS was leading me a different route than I had come from, and I only wore a light jacket. People on the streets were all men grouped up near tight alleys, and there were no longer any bars or signs of the mid-city I was most familiar with. As I started to feel uneasy, my phone screen went black. I completely lost it. I didn't care about anybody hearing me. I just shouted every curse word and started beating my phone to get it to start again. It was dead. I looked around me to see if there was anything just slightly familiar, but there wasn't. Understanding that I had to take responsibility quickly for the situation I'd put myself in, I walked straight up to the first person who walked past me. They could sense that I was desperate, but also that I wasn't that old, so luckily this was someone who was willing to help. I told them a bit of my story and asked them about directions to the city center from which I would be able to find my way back to the building. The encounter helped me out. It was a guy around my dad's age. I don't remember much about how he looked, but he seemed friendly. Instead of just following me to the city center, he followed me all the way back to my hotel, even with the heavy rain beating us up. Still on the fence of him being a stranger, I made sure to keep a hand on my pocket with my keys and my phone the whole way. I thanked him finally, relieved that what I thought would be the worst experience of the night was over and done with. I locked myself into the building. They had automatic lock systems, which I thought was pretty safe. You get to lock off both the building and the rooms automatically, right? No chance of anybody following or getting inside unless they're staying there and have the keys, right? I went in and took a quick shower, got ready for the few hours of sleep I had left, and passed out in bed. When I woke up, a flashlight was pointed at my face. I squinted my eyes. A stranger's face was inches away. Maybe it was the shock from the guy being all up on me, but I didn't make a sound. My heart jumped out of my chest as I quickly sat up as far as I could in the bottom bunk I had been sleeping in. I asked in English who he was. All of my body was tensed up, but since my 3 roommates were sleeping and the man was not threatening me with anything, I sensed that it was a somewhat safe situation. He told me that he came from the lobby, that he was helping my friend Samuel with finding something he had lost. Confused and dizzy, I grabbed out for my phone and watch, which were laying right beside me on the bed. The time was around 4 a.m. I did have a friend called Samuel. He was known to be impulsive, so I didn't think much of it. The man backed away from my bedside and started looking inside our closet. I asked him what Samuel had lost. Why was he looking inside the closet of our room, which Samuel hadn't been in, at 4 in the morning? I sat up and turned the flashlight from my phone on and pointed it at the man. His visa, he answered. He can't find his visa. Another student came into our room. He started talking to the man about the visa. They were both looking for it. Being extremely tired, I assumed they all were. Samuel, him, the man. Even if the whole thing was strange, other guys from my school were out there searching for the visa with the man. My roommates started waking up, asking the same questions I had. I answered them as the man was scanning through our stuff, and I kind of made it sound as though I thought it was weird and maybe something was up. After a while, though, heavily fatigued, I fell back asleep. The last thing I remember was me staring at the man as he was scanning through the backpack belonging to the guy across from me. I guess on a trip like this, you never know what's going to happen to you. And by morning, when we were all awake and started talking, we learned the truth of what happened. 3 guys were missing their stuff, visa, laptop, and other personal items. They were gone, and the guy who claimed to come from the lobby, of course, did not. How he got in is a mystery, but apparently, he woke up the guys in the other rooms and made up the whole Samuel's visa is missing story after probably having stolen his visa and reading his name. He took advantage of all of us being tired and naive young guys in a foreign country. The reason he had been up in my face must have been because of my phone and watch laying there, and he was about to steal it. There were no cameras in the building as far as I knew. The police came pretty quickly, and our bus ride home got pushed back so Samuel and the others could talk to the police. We never got an update from what happened. Samuel and the others received new visas and so on back in Denmark. I didn't hear much about it after that, but to this day, I can't help myself but think if somehow what happened was my fault. Somebody could have followed me without me noticing, or maybe I didn't close the big main door properly for it to lock when I hurried up back inside. I was likely the last one to get inside before the man entered the building since it was so late, and I guess if he wasn't all up in my face because of my personal items, there's always the possibility that he pointed that flashlight directly in my face and none of the others, because he recognized me. In late summer 2019, my friends and I went on a trip to the far north of Norway, up in the Arctic Circle in an area called Lofoten. It's a very scenic region, great for hiking and outdoor pursuits. We flew into the nearest city to rent a car, but population density is sparse up there and large towns are few and far between. We were booked into an apartment in a small fishing village, which was about a 7-hour drive from the airport we flew into. After a long day of traveling, we wanted to get to our rental as soon as possible. The speed limits were very strict also, which didn't help, and I have to admit, as the named and only driver of the group, I found it a struggle to stick to them at times. There were long stretches of road which stretched miles in front of us with no other traffic in sight. Anyway, it was approaching midnight, and we had broken the back of the journey. We had just passed the main town in the area, and it was now only 40 minutes left to go until we arrived at the place we were staying. Most of the road had been single lanes, but it split into an overtaking lane as we exited the town. I took this opportunity to pass a Golf which was ahead of us. I passed the car thinking nothing of it. I was talking with my friends when, suddenly, I saw him get really close to the back of our car now that we were in front. He would repeatedly come closer and then back off until he switched on a large floodlight on the roof of his car. They had long, dark winters, so I guess they used these lights during those months mainly. It was very bright and distracting. As I mentioned earlier, the Norwegians seem to take their road safety and speed limits very seriously, and although I thought he may have taken offense to what he thought was reckless driving, I did nothing controversial in overtaking this guy. I did my best to remain calm and composed on the road and obey the speed limit as I thought he may back off. I muttered to my friend Jesse, who was in the front seat with me, "Let's see if this guy follows us here." Needless to say, he did, and my patience began to wear thin. I put some distance between us, and strangely, he didn't speed up to catch us. By now, the whole group was nervous, but as he didn't race to catch us, we thought it might be okay. We then hit a red light at a one-lane bridge which led to the village. Pensively looking in the mirror, I saw him wind around the corner when the light went green. I decided it would be sensible not to drive straight to our apartment and unpack our car, as this guy would know where we were staying. So instead, I decided to wind through different random streets in the village and see if he followed. My heart sank as he did, and everyone was panicking. I have to mention, it was now past 1 a.m., and we were in a very remote area. Eventually, we hit a dead end, and I had to do a turn to face him. He tried to block us in, but his car was fairly small, and with a bit of wheel work, I managed to get past him. As I did, I caught a look at the guy. His face was cold and expressionless. His eyes simply stayed locked on us, following us as we raced past him. There were 3 guys in our group, and with numbers on our side, I had thought about getting out and confronting him. But this is an isolated area where guns are legal and used often for hunting and fishing, so for all I knew, he had one waiting for us in his front seat. I mean, this guy already followed us for nearly an hour in the middle of the night. Who knew what he was capable of? My friend decided to call the local police station, which was hard as we didn't know the area or the language. Luckily, we did manage to find a station to contact, and the operator spoke English. They said an officer would take our details at the station, but it was back in the town we had passed, another 40 minutes away. I drove quickly. This time the guy was right behind us the whole way. As we began to see signs for the town and houses on the outskirts, the guy following us slowed right down. I felt a little safer, but this feeling was short-lived, as I saw in my rearview mirror that 2 cars were waiting to join him off the side of the road. One pulled out in front of him and another behind him. There was now a convoy of 3 cars all traveling like a pack. We were following Google Maps to the police station. It was in an industrial harbor area of the town, full of warehouses and side alleys. The station was right at the end, and as we pulled into the parking lot, we saw the convoy split in different directions. They clearly knew we were going to the police. We were shocked, however, to find that there was seemingly no one inside the station. It was pitch black. We got a hold of the operator again, and they said that an officer was just coming. We could see the cars now circling like sharks in the distance. 5 minutes or so went by like this, and then a large male officer emerged on foot from around the back corner of the building. Although fairly aloof at first, he could clearly see the girls in our group crying and visibly shaken, and he offered to escort us out of town. He said he would go and get a van for us to start out. We pulled off and anxiously drove past each side alley and dark warehouse parking bay. I could see the officer was now coming up behind us, when suddenly 2 of the cars pulled out from the sides of us, and the Golf that had started this whole thing drove right past us, shooting me in a motionless stare as he drove by. I pumped the horn several times and slammed on the brakes, hoping the officer would figure out that this was the guy that had been stalking us. A few seconds went by. I was staring in the mirror. Then, to my relief, the officer put the van's lights on and pulled out to block the Golf guy from going any further. I could hear the van door slam shut, and my friend Jesse jumped out of the car and ran behind the police van to see what was going on. I followed about a minute later, thinking that should the worst happen, we had a burly officer with us, and this might be our best chance of taking this guy down. As I came to the back of the van, I saw the cold face of the guy who had been following us. He was an average-looking man who seemed to have a thick Russian or Eastern European accent as he muttered to the officer while opening his car door, still staring at me, by the way. I was shocked that he was starting his car up again, but the officer rightly pointed out that he had technically done nothing wrong. It wasn't a crime to drive on a road in the middle of the night, and there was nothing to pin on him. The officer said he took his details, though, and if he came close to us again, we now had a direct number to ring, and it would be escalated. All the officer could do was fully escort us out of town as promised, but he couldn't drive us all the way back to our village and accommodation. He broke off from us on the outskirts of town. I sighed in both relief and dread as we were now on our own. I kept checking the mirror, and no one was visibly following us. I still wasn't taking any chances, though, and parked away from our apartment. We locked the door behind us and tried to forget about the whole saga. The 2 extra cars were the disturbing part of this. Who were they, and why did he call them? Either way, they sure had something planned, and I'm just glad we were able to navigate our way to the police in a foreign country. The rest of the trip went well. It really is a stunning part of the world, but it's sobering to reflect on how differently it could have ended.